All right, well, thanks, Dave. Hey, everybody. Like Dave said, I'm Kevin Hjertaas. I'm with MTN Guiding. And if you've been coming to these, you know the rest of the group. We've got Zoe Ryan here from Sunshine Village. She's an avalanche technician up there and ski patroller. And she's here to help us out with all the snow science, the snow conditions, the weather conditions, all those sort of factors. She's been following the snowpack all season and sort of on top of that. So Zoe, we're going to come right back to you and start there. But first off, I should introduce Marcus Baranow, who we'll be talking to. And if you guys have been, again, if you've been watching the last few, Marcus has been very generous with his time. You guys will all know him from the guidebooks, Confessions of a Ski Bum. He writes the guidebooks that most of you probably use when you go skiing around here. And he's very generous with his beta and his time, and he's also a super prolific skier, so he's always out there most days, and he's kind of our go-to guy when it comes to conditions and what people have been skiing and what's good right now and how things are looking. And then we'll also check in with Joelle there at the shop at the end of the day. Looks like you're working on boots this time, but yeah, we'll check in back with you, Joelle, near the end, or if anything comes up that you can help us out with. You're our man for what's going on in the community, what people have been up to, and what's going on around the shop. And that's sort of the way we'll go through it today, guys. So we'll talk a little bit about conditions, what's been happening since the last time we all chatted, and how we think it's going to be looking for the next little while, what people have been skiing, what's been good, what we think is going to be good for the next little while, and yeah, and then some of the trends going in and around, and a little bit about some of the access issues as well. And then we'll be getting to everyone's questions. And like Dave said, the more questions, the better. That's going to make this more fun for everybody. So, well, after all that, Zoe, let's check in. Last time we talked, it was early January, and I can't remember what conditions were as far as the bulletin at that point, but I think we were expecting things to get kind of cold. We were looking ahead at high pressure and thinking it would get so cold that the snowpack would start to facet out and become sort of that more classic rocky snowpack, which is a weak base and some bridging on top. But we didn't get that, did we? What have we been seeing for the last month?
Totally. I'm just gonna bear with me. I'm just gonna share my screen here, and I'll bring up a couple of visuals for you guys. But yeah, like Kevin was saying, we really didn't see the January that we generally see. Can you guys see what I'm seeing there?
Yeah, you bet. That looks great, Zoe.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, last time we talked, I think it was the 14th of January. At that time, we had just received about 15 to 40 centimeters of new snow, depending on where you were in Banff National Park. And the key thing with that is that it came in with pretty strong to extreme winds. And at the time, there was pretty widespread wind effect in the alpine and in many open tree line areas. And that really made the ski quality a little bit poor. And it also came with a nice bit of high pressure following that.
Did that lead to a big avalanche cycle, Zoe? You'd think all that wind would lead to a big avalanche cycle.
Totally. So that snow and wind gave us pretty big avalanche cycle, up to size 2.5, and then 2.5 sized avalanches. And key with those avalanches that they were all within the new storm snow. We weren't seeing any reactivity on those persistent weak layers that we had been talking about in our last snowpack update.
Right.
So following this new snow, it buried our January 11th drought layer. So that drought layer was from the cold, clear temperatures before that. It buried near surface facets, surface hoar in a few areas, and also a thin sun crust on steep solar aspects. So like I was saying, following this, let me see if I can switch my screen here. There we go.
Oh yeah.
So there we go. Yeah. So following that snow, you can see following January 11th, we had a nice ridge of high pressure move in. And so we had clear skies, very little new snow or input to the snowpack. And it was a nice time to be out in the mountains, really. The caveat being there that with that high pressure, there had been a lot of wind effect in the alpine and tree line. And people were seeing some areas that the skiing wasn't so good. So just to pause here for a minute, we're looking at a snow profile that was done at Bow Summit on the 93 North following that storm. And maybe Kevin, you can help me break this down a little bit for people, but you can see at the top here, our January 11th layer was buried underneath the new snow.
Yeah, actually, this is great because I was hoping we could, these snow profiles graphed this way are starting to be more public, available and in the Min and on the bulletin and stuff. So it's probably good just to make sure everyone knows how to read them. The most obvious thing you see is those big blue blocks there. And what those are the density of snow or the resistance when you put your finger or something into the snowpack. So the further those blocks go left, the more dense that snow is. So I see there's a few weaker layers, so not as dense in the upper, say, half of the snowpack. I see 3 of them there. And then near the bottom, I see one pretty hard layer. And I'm guessing that's our melt freeze crust that we started the season talking about. And yeah, that's probably good for now, Zoe. There's all the forms, which are really the type of snow crystal that people, could maybe find interesting. You see those 3 weak layers in the top third. I don't know if you can kind of put the cursor on those 3, Zoe, but yeah, these are spots where the snow's weaker. And the little symbols beside them are a V, and that V is for surface hoar. So these are your buried surface hoar layers. And then if you just scan all the way to the right, you'll see what they're named and what some of the test results are on them and stuff. Yeah. So I'm guessing you're going to tell us about some of those middle of the snowpack weak layers, or?
Totally, yeah. So like I was saying, our January 11th layer got buried, which everyone can see near the top of the snowpack. And then lower down in the snowpack, you can see the December 13th, the December 7th, and the November 5th. It's going to be really common in these profiles that the person doing it will identify these weak layers for you. So those layers were buried earlier in the season, and we really still had them on our mind when this storm came through, thinking that we might see reactivity on them. But actually, we didn't see very much reactivity on these layers. And in this time of high pressure, we actually were able to take persistent slab off of the avalanche bulletin and just go with the wind slab hazard. There was no avalanches, or very few avalanches on these layers, and we were really starting to see them round out and heal.
So that was mid-January, and that's when we were expecting to see that activity, and we didn't. So then we started moving towards the green brick, right? Low. Is that sort of
exactly? Yeah. So
oh, wow.
We started moving towards the green brick. This is just a depiction of what the ski quality was like in some areas. I know that Kananaskis had it pretty tough with that wind event. This is up on the French Glacier, if you know where that is.
Yep.
And here we're talking about that sastrugi, which I think was mentioned in the snowpack summary or the snowpack update. So sastrugi is what we're seeing in this picture here on the snow. It's that really textured snow that's been heavily wind affected.
I've got a question from Nicholas Randall. I was going to put him on camera, but he says he's eating. He doesn't want to record stuff. So Nicholas says, "Hey, I'm actually in the middle of eating. Could you read the question out for me?" So he asks, "When was the last time you remember the eastern slopes getting a big load of powder like the 80 or 100 centimeters that K Country got last week?"
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's actually something that we'll probably talk about a little bit later here, but definitely unusual for the eastern slopes to see more snow. And that was with a low pressure system that was centered to the south of us and was kind of coming up from the southwest. And most of the precipitation with that was falling on the eastern slopes and then tapering as it reached the north.
Yeah, so Zoe, I actually wasn't totally following that storm, so just correct me if I'm wrong, but the classic way that the eastern slopes see more snow than the Divide and Lake Louise areas are when it's what everyone refers to as an upslope. So if everyone's telling you, oh, it's an upslope, that's when you want to look at probably skiing the Front Ranges and the eastern edge of the Rockies. And Zoe was alluding to the fact that what that means usually is a storm it's maybe just south of us. And if you picture storms coming across the continent, spinning counterclockwise, they're spitting back at us from sort of the southeast. Was that the case this time, Zoe, or did I just put my foot in my mouth?
I think with our mid-January storm, that was the case, but with the last storm we just received, I'm not sure if there was an upslope component. I think that what happened, I was following the weather a little bit closely, and I am definitely not a weather forecaster by any means, but it seemed that a lee low actually developed in southern Alberta, and it wasn't necessarily an upslope, but it was just pushing these really intense convective cells of precipitation that were mainly falling in the southern regions.
Okay, that makes sense.
There's a little bit of a conversation going on just in the chat here that maybe I'll invite Megan Smith and Marcus to maybe talk a little bit about. Megan, are you there?
Yep, I am. So my question was about if it's unusual to see that more dense layer at the bottom of the snowpack. Like, I'm still kind of learning about a usual rocky snowpack, but my understanding was the bottom usually is facets and weak, and that didn't seem to be the explanation. But Marcus is saying it is a bit unusual, so I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, Megan, I got to ask it. Does that qualify as a newbie question? Should we enter your name in the draw for the pass?
I don't know. Kevin can judge that.
Okay.
I'd say enter her. I mean, it's not so new that she doesn't know what it should look like, it sounds like. Yeah, you're right, Megan. Usually this time of year, we would expect to see a faceted out base of the snowpack that consists mostly of depth hoar and is weaker. So on that graph that Zoe was showing us, yeah, that bottom would usually be weaker and less of a big block, if you know what I mean. And last time Zoe and I talked, we were talking about anticipating that happening over the next little while, and it just didn't happen last month because it hasn't quite been as cold as we would normally think, and the snowpack's average or deeper. Are we average or deeper right now, Zoe? Where are we?
Yeah, we are deeper than average right now. We're sitting at about like 170 centimeters for sunshine at 2,200 meters, which for our resort would be a bit deeper than average.
Okay, so slightly deeper than average snowpack and a slightly warmer than average midwinter to this point, and so less faceting, less depth hoar growth. But you're right, Megan. We would be worried about the weak basal facets you would be reading about. Does that answer your question? Yeah, perfect. Great. All right, so I feel like we derailed you.
That's all good. Yeah, so we were just talking about the high pressure mid-January. Right. We had low avalanche conditions. There's actually a period of time where the Banff National Park bulletin took all avalanche hazards off the bulletin, which is pretty unusual. So the other key with this period of low avalanche hazard is that we were forming a new drought layer with these clear skies and cold temperatures. So there was surface hoar formation on the first surface, some faceting occurring, and again, a thin melt freeze crust was forming on steep solar aspects.
Great.
So here is a look at our HN24, which is the 24-hour snowfall. And you can see this period of where we had no snow. And then following that, we had a smaller low pressure system come in that brought about 10 to 15 centimeters of new snow. Most of that snow was pretty low density, and it wasn't really forming wind slab except for in the high alpine. And for the most part was just running as loose dry avalanches, easily on the old hard wind slab or facets on the surface.
Nice. So Brent, we'll come right back to your question in a second there, because I think Zoe will wrap us up on the current weather, and then it'll lead right into your question.
Totally. So following that little bit of snow, we then had the more significant storm that we were just talking about, where K Country and the eastern ranges saw quite a bit more precipitation. That storm came in a little bit warmer and with quite a bit of wind, and that warmth and wind really upped the avalanche hazard for us. And there was a period in time where it was snowing pretty heavily and the avalanche hazard was high for, I think, like 2 or 3 days there. So
that's why we
following,
called it the red-green colorblind this time, right? Because I think usually we're not anticipating the last 2 weeks of January going from full green brick to full red brick and then almost back again. So low hazard, high hazard, low hazard again. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. Everyone's going to have whiplash here.
yeah, totally. So yeah, that, oh, I think I just lost it there. There we go. So following that, yeah, we had a pretty big pulse of snow. Again, most of the results we were seeing were within the new storm snow. So we weren't seeing reactivity on the persistent slab layers, which was really good. And we weren't seeing very many deep avalanches. Now, there was a couple of exceptions to that. One of them being this observation from the Min on Unity Peak. You can see that there's really wide propagation within this crown line. And that's really indicative of a persistent slab avalanche to have that wide propagation. And you can also see, it might be a little bit tough on your screen, but you can see in the bed surface, it looks like it's pretty shallow and pretty close to the ground. And that would be a sign that it's a deeper avalanche as well.
When was this one, Zoe?
This one was...
Just roughly.
Yeah, it was last week before it started getting cold.
Okay.
And then one other interesting one that I wanted to bring up to wrap it up here. A couple of days ago, there was a skier accidental reported on Kent Ridge, which if you don't know where that is, it's near the Kananaskis Lakes. And that was the fourth skier on the slope that triggered a size 2.5 avalanche that ran on a basal weak layer, they said. So suspecting that's going to be our deep persistent avalanche. It sounds like it was a pretty shallow area where that happened, but just something to keep on the radar that with this new big load, especially in Kananaskis, where it was already a shallower, more faceted snowpack, there is a possibility we'll start to see that deep persistent layer wake up, as we like to say.
Awesome. Well, that brought up a few questions and a few really good ones. First off, I just wanted to mention that when you were showing those graphs, we were talking about the HN24, which is the height of new snow in 24 hours. So really what Zoe was talking about there is the storms that came through. You know, we had, she was just breaking down the storms and breaking them down by how much snow we got in a 1 day period. So that's what the HN24 meant there, Becky. And, or Robert, sorry, asked that one. And then Brent and Becky had similar but different questions. One was about, in the bulletin recently, it's talked about cold weather locking the snowpack down and basically decreasing avalanche hazard. Zoe and I were talking earlier about how to describe this best. It's actually a tricky thing to describe. If you want to have just the takeaway Cole's notes, usually as temperature decreases and it gets cold, the reactivity of the snow decreases as well, and avalanches are less likely. Just as sort of a general blanket statement. The reasons for that are probably more sciencey than I could really explain very well. I like to think of it though as when the weather's that cold, if you go skiing, you'll feel just your skis have so much friction, right? If it's all of a sudden minus 25, you just feel really slow. There's a lot of friction. And when you have two different layers of snow trying to slide on each other, that friction is there as well. And really just everything gets a little more dead and a little less volatile the further it gets away from freezing or melting point, really. We could probably go into that better, but that's maybe all we have time for right now. And then Becky was asking if the current cold weather will have an effect on the snowpack. And the short answer is no, not in a day or two, other than what we just talked about, that generally avalanche hazard decreases a bit. But people often confuse that with faceting, which is a long-term process, which takes days, weeks, or more to weaken the snowpack. And cold temperatures will do that. Like we were saying to earlier there, that the bottom of the snowpack especially weakens over cold temperatures. So I hope that answers your question, Becky, that it doesn't have an effect on it other than to decrease avalanche danger in the short term, but perhaps over long term weaken the snowpack and eventually maybe increase avalanche danger in a few weeks. Zoe, I think just to piggyback on that, I wonder if you talked about drought layers a bit. I wonder if you could talk about why, what that is that happens that makes a drought layer dangerous later when it gets buried. What's happening to that surface snow before it gets buried? Why do we talk about drought layers?
Yeah, so we're talking about drought layers. The big thing that's happening in the snow is generally near surface faceting, which faceting we're talking about the crystals not bonding as well to each other. They're becoming sugary and weak. And the other one is going to be surface hoar formation. So those are those big feathery crystals that form on the surface on those cold, clear nights. And when those get buried, you have this weak layer on the surface that then gets buried by the new snow, and it creates a really good weak layer for avalanches to fail on.
Awesome. Okay, then I wonder if maybe we should talk about looking ahead after we talk to Marcus and see what's been skiing well. Maybe we'll come back and talk about, looking ahead, weather coming our way and snowpack concerns coming our way, Zoe.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, thanks. Marcus, you've been quiet. We better get you involved here.
All right.
So we just talked a whole bunch about what's been happening in the last month when it comes to snow and sort of the sciencey nerdy stuff. What's been going on out in the field? Like, what have people been skiing? What's been fun? There was a green brick for a while. Like, a lot of stuff must have got done.
Yeah, so I think my screen should be sharing.
Looks good.
All right, so I'll take you on my own little journey during what she was just brought us on with the snowpack. Right after that storm, the interesting thing about the storm around here anyway, there was a quick reverse loading situation. So a lot of south faces right at the tail end of that February's or January storm. The south faces got like a loading just before the storm ended. So this is one of the lines I skied right after that, right after it went to almost green brick. It's on, I think it's pronounced Okie or Oak. You can see up here, Mount Oak, Long Ridge. This is the 93 South. And there's a 1,400 meter line here. Lots of people were skiing it. We skied a slight variation, which was all powder. But even in the Alpine, it was really nice. Right at the summit, it was that totally screwed doggy, or however you pronounce it. But yeah, once you got to the summit, it was pretty nice and creamy all the way down to the bottom. It was really great. I saw a lot of people skiing tumbling. I'm not going to get into all the different lines in this area, but this is like what people call tumbling Northeast 5, tumbling peaks way up here, which we actually saw Avalanche the day we skied that other line come off these head walls. But a lot of people ski in these chutes. That's been a super popular one lately and since the last storm. Then way down here, down 93 South, we got the Simpsons slide paths. So this is, if you ever look at the weather stations on the Parks Canada stuff, they're just over here on this ridge. And here you have what people are calling the Simpson Burn. I've heard a few other names. The Simpson slide paths are the traditional names over here. But yeah, people have been skiing this a lot. It's been great. I haven't skied it recently, but I know lots of people have been. Just before the February storm, I don't have a shortcut. So we skied, it was literally the day the last storm started. We went up to Castle Mountain, up to Rockbound, skied the north face down here, which requires a rappel. So bring a rope if you're gonna go. But as we skied this upper north face, we were actually watching it was just really new snow just starting to become reactive. It was just the top foot or two, and the snow was blowing in from the right of the screen and into this ball. And basically between all the cliff bands as I skied, I just ski cut and it would just propagate. like 100 meters wide, but only move about a meter or two down. So we were right at the start of the storm. Like it had just started snowing about 2-3 hours before we started skiing down. So that was really cool to watch. And I'm really happy we weren't there another couple hours later. And then this week, a few things that got skied. Miners got skied. So Adam and friends, they went up, I think, during their lunch break. And I think they said that it wasn't quite ready. I don't know all the details.
Yeah, I think it was worse than that.
It was like pretty shit, don't go kind of thing.
Yeah. So maybe wait for that, but you know, if you're adventurous. Interesting one. The last couple of days, White Rabbit off Ogden have been skied pretty consistently. And then I think it was yesterday, someone was following the boot pack. So when you do White Rabbit, you go to Sherbrooke Lake. So people are probably more familiar with this area, which is Paget Glades. But if you go up to Sherbrooke Lake, work these trees and go up the ridge, you'll find this really steep slab couloir going onto a fan. But I guess yesterday or today, a party went up and followed the tracks, and the whole cornice, which is usually quite big, completely collapsed. They described it as like a large minivan sized cornice that collapsed, and there's still one that's hanging just by a thread. So if you're going to go up there, watch for that.
That's pretty interesting, Marcus. Zoe was, when we talked earlier, was talking a bit about that, about how cornices are not growing right now. Usually we're about cornices when it's been really windy and cornices are building and growing, but right now they're not growing, they're actually weakening, Zoe. Is that right? Or what's going on there?
Yeah, so like Kevin was talking with the faceting process, which is generally quite a slow process, it'll also affect cornice lines. So you'll see faceting, particularly around the rocks at the front of the cornice lines. And that really weakens the cornices over time. And actually through a long period of cold weather, you can see cornice failure just from those cold temperatures and faceting around the cornice line. Again, that's a pretty slow process. Probably not something we're going to see right away, but something to consider in the future for sure.
Right, but it does sound like there's been a couple, and if your guys' role here is to be the smart people with all the info out there, my role is to be the old guy with old man wisdom. And my old man wisdom tells you all to stay way away from cornices. Once they start falling like that, they pull back further than you think. It's not usually right on the edge in these kind of conditions where you think you're on ridge line. It's actually often a meter or two further back. So yeah, my spider senses would be going off right now. I'd be staying a little further away from cornices than you would think for the next while. For sure. Sorry to derail you there, Marcus, but we did have a question. Thanks.
If you are going to go to White Rabbit, the party that triggered that cornice stated that the cornice is actually still in the run. The run's quite skinny, and the cornice is quite big. So I would probably just skip that altogether. Another area I was in recently, wrong area, is I went back to the Boom Rockfall area. So you have Boom Lake. A lot of people know Kindergarten Couloir, which is over here, which also has large cornices. I've been hit by one there, so I would avoid that right now maybe. But on the other side is some pretty mellow pillow terrain. It had a fair amount of tracks in it, but there's a lot of room in there. Basically, these areas, you look at Avalanche Pass, it's actually the mountain has collapsed and taken out all the trees. So it's just pillows. That's about 3 kilometers up Boom Lake. I don't know anyone that's been skiing Taylor. I haven't noticed too many cars since it got cold. It's pretty chilly going up in the shade in Taylor. So that might be a good spot to go with less tracks once this cold period ends. But yeah, I wouldn't go there right now in the shade. But yeah, I mean, other than that, the usual places are being skied. 93 North, I know a lot of people have been skiing Surprise Pass. So you've seen the sort of typical stuff, but those are kind of the highlights I want to point out.
Thanks. Joel, looks like you want to jump in with something there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it seems to be this year like a lot of the same sort of scenario repeating, where we get like a pulse of snow or something, and then you kind of get like the areas that get the least amount kind of staying a bit more kind of orange, sort of like, not quite as good skiing. And then for us, like we've been hearing the most consistently, I'd say it's kind of like the deeper snowpack areas. So like when you look at 93 South this year, been getting a lot more snow, and then the whole kind of Yoho Emerald field has been skiing like consistently very good. And also like people, I bought like, watching it from the shop here, like I've been skiing like a little bit down in the 93 South, but not like every day. And I've been really, really surprised at how quickly, I've been skiing, like I skied like mid-storm in the 93 South, and like a couple of days later, people were already hitting the Alpine, like, and it like jumping off cornices and stuff. And there's like, rock solid stability, like what it felt like, at least right away in those kind of deeper snowpacks. And it's kind of the same reports we've been getting the last, 10 days from the Emerald area. Is the same thing with that kind of like deeper snow, and the temps are a bit mellower, and they've been having inversions and all that. And it just seems like that's been consistently skiing better. So yeah, that's kind of, what we hear a lot of the shop, and where a lot of us have been going is definitely, those kind of popular spots this year outside of the guidebook, where there's been a lot of crowds pretty consistently as well.
That makes sense. I mean, it's pretty classic, especially midwinter in the Rockies, that the deeper snowpack areas are also the more stable. I think that's a little tough sometimes when you're new to the backcountry to think, oh, there's more snow. Shouldn't that be more dangerous from an avalanche perspective? In our neck of the woods, it's usually sort of the opposite, right? The deeper snowpack doesn't have those same weaknesses often. What are some of the boldest lines you've heard people skiing, Joel?
South Esconavon got skied a bunch. That was cool. I think Chris Brazel came up from Golden and skied it, and then a bunch of other people followed. Burgess got skied again. That field, Yoho has been seeing a lot of action, just like with the depth that they've been having, and I think a lot less wind. It's been a lot more sheltered behind those kind of big mountains, and somehow they haven't been getting quite the same amount of wind effect as the 93 North and even like, the peaks around Castle Junction. But yeah, like, we've been hearing a lot of like NAR going on in the Emerald area, and also like, that like Marcus was saying, right, the tumbling, Vermilion Crossing, people have been getting back there consistently after like new snow, and it's been skiing really good, really quickly. And like, I have to admit, I was one of those weak people on Monday who said like, I am not skiing in this temperature. And we got reports like for Monday, Tuesday, and yesterday, that like, in field up in the Alpine was like -10, -12, despite being -35 like at Lake Louise. So that's some like huge inversion that I'm like really like kicking myself for not getting out those days. But yeah, like it seems like following the weather and the weather station has been paying off as well, for like finding the warmer hair.
Good point. Yeah, I mean, two things there to highlight. One is that you can find those weather stations when you go to the Parks Canada Avalanche Bulletin or Avalanche Forecast, sorry, you'll see weather stations to click on, and there's weather stations all over the national park. And then you can see if temperatures are colder up high, or if temperatures are inverted and it's warmer up high. And then the other thing, talking about 93 South being very trendy and in vogue this year, that's mostly because the snowpack hasn't been as faceted. And so down low in the trees where it's low elevation and usually thin and rotten, it hasn't been as thin and rotten. Yeah, we have a couple snowpack questions that have come in, Zoe, but maybe before we get to that, let's just check in with Marcus and say, like, how about cold weather objectives? Like, you want to stay in the sun right now. Are there places that people have been having good luck staying in the sun? Like, what are, I think a Dolomite Shoulder, what are some other sunny objectives that are good?
Yeah, Dolomite Shoulder works. I don't know. I haven't been out there, and it can be quite rocky when there's a lot of wind. So I don't know how it reloaded. But that last storm did come in kind of heavy. One thing we noticed that in the Rock Bound Lake area is before that last storm, you saw a lot of rock on the windward areas, and after that last storm, now it looks like you wouldn't hit rock at all. You might still hit rock, but that still might end up being good for something like Dolomite Shoulder. So for those unfamiliar with that, this is the 93 North. I'll just zoom out. Hector Lake, Lake Louise. So you just drive north. This is Mosquito Creek Campgrounds right here. And if you go up this rib, then you get up into Dolomite Shoulder. That's usually a really great one for a sunny day. Great views. You can see very far away, including some of the Wapta and Bow Peak and Granddaddy Couloir. The other one that's traditionally good on a sunny is this area. It's the Burn on Helen Shoulder. So
Yeah.
right across from very cold area to go to would be Crowfoot Glades. Right across the way you have the Burn. You have this ball here. You got some good skiing on the backside, which will be on the shade by midday. But this whole area is actually quite good low angle glades. And you can ski almost back to the road in most cases, unless you get unlucky. But this whole area is quite good. And then you also have observation. If there's a strong inversion on the 93 North, which I haven't really seen the last couple days, but you know, this whole area, pretty classic sunny slopes. If you go up between, this is Jimmy Jr. Creek, this is Cirque 4, and this is Observation Subpeak. This south ball here is great on a sunny day. Even these lower slopes face the sun all day. You're never really in the shade till quite late in the day. And then you've got the Roadside Shoots here. Where am I? There's Bow Summit. So yeah, up in here, you could ski these chutes. They are a little bit train trappy, but actually this one, I think both of them actually went early season and they filled in. Usually it's like a half pipe, but yeah, they almost like completely filled in quite early in the season from avalanche debris. So, I mean, I don't know how the recent loading has gone on, whatever weak layers would have been up there. So it's probably a little shallower up here. So you might want to just be careful in there, but these lower angle trees here can be quite good. And you're mostly in the sun, even though you're in the trees. So anything on the west side, even Cirque 4, you're pretty in the sun for most of the day.
Nice. Well, that's good, because Zoe, are we sometimes in the Rockies? I haven't even looked ahead of the forecast, but I just know from past years in the Rockies, sometimes when this omega block or polar vortex or just the cold high pressure sets in, it's sometimes here for a long time. And I know often the forecast says it's going to get better in 3 days, but it's always 3 days away. What are we looking ahead to now?
Yeah, totally. So I think today was actually our coldest day yet. The forecast is saying that tomorrow we are supposed to see a slight increase in temperatures up into the -20 range. And that's probably going to persist for the next week or two. So a little bit warmer relatively, but if you ask me, -20 is still pretty darn cold.
-20 is pretty darn cold. And just because I have you right now, we might as well answer the two questions in the chat that pertain to that cold in the snowpack. And one of them was about faceting again, and -20. We don't have 2 meters of snow on a lot of our mountains, so -20 is enough for the snowpack to be faceting, the basal facets to be growing, right?
Yeah, definitely. So with our shallow snowpack in the Rockies, the biggest thing is that we talk about is temperature gradient in the snowpack. So if you think about the ground surface being at 0 degrees and the air temperature being -20, you've only got, what, 1.5 meters of snow in between that. There's going to be a really drastic temperature gradient within the snowpack. That's really going to promote faceting. which is why we see so much faceting in the Rockies.
Totally. And earlier you mentioned thin spots around cornices being more faceted because they're shallower. But that also kind of brings us back to what you were saying earlier, that we've had a couple quite good wind events this year. And that's led to me driving around, looking at the Alpine and thinking, wow, you said it's a better, we have more snow on the ground than we often do this time of year in your snow plot. But when you look at the Alpine, there are spots here and in the Selkirks too that just look really, really thin.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of spatial variability in the Alpine. There's going to be areas that have a lot of snow, like 3 meters plus of snow, and there's going to be areas that have almost no snow. So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and those will facet out different. But I think we covered that. But there was one question here. I didn't catch. Dave passed it on to us.
Yeah, it was actually from Stacy, who says she's eating her stir fry right now. So let's see if we can catch her with her mouth full. Stacy, are you there? She's looking for the mute button.
No, I'm here.
Okay.
My question was just around surface hoar formation, of just in the Rockies, it being so cold but dry, if it forms differently in comparison to being like, let's say, -10 and in a little bit of a different climate.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So generally, actually, the Rockies are less conducive with surface hoar growth. The key why interior BC sees so much surface hoar growth is from the high relative humidity. So higher humidity in the air. And then again, those like -10, -15 temperatures are pretty ideal for surface hoar growth.
Yeah, and usually when you're worried about surface hoar problems, you're worried about a certain spot in the mountain too, and that's the spot that's sheltered enough that the surface hoar is protected from wind and sun. So you're often thinking again of central BC, where there's that really nice subalpine, sort of where the trees start, but they're spaced out enough that surface hoar can grow and avalanches can happen. In the Rockies, usually it's wind blasted in the Alpine and the trees are too tight. So it's not as much a problem we worry about as often, hey?
Perfect, that's helpful, thank you.
Great. Dave, was there one other question there I was missing? Or there was one Eric asked that I thought we might get to.
Sure, let me just go up and see if I can find it. Eric, did you want to share your question or has it been answered? Eric Sinclair?
Oh, it was about compaction, Eric.
Yeah, do you want to share your question, Eric? Oh, he's off mute, but his mouth is moving, but I don't think he's got it. Let me read it out. So Eric asked, I am curious about heavily skied areas like Bow Summit and Black Prince. Does this traffic and mixing of the layers from activity provide a more stable snowpack?
Can I start and then throw it to you, Zoe, for the ski hill version?
Totally, that sounds great.
Actually, Marcus, you probably have something to chip in on this too. I mean, in general, so the concept is there's a weak layer. Let's say it's buried by 10 centimeters. There's a surface hoar layer. If we all go ski that surface hoar layer gets mixed up in all the snow on the surface and the tracks stir it all up. If there's some other layers that are buried and weak, maybe everyone's traffic just pounds them down and they don't get preserved. So if we think back to that graph we saw of a snow profile, maybe those weak spots are crunched and disappear. I think we should go to Marcus first. Are there any places in the backcountry, Marcus, that you ski? I can think of maybe one or two, but are there any places in the backcountry you ski where you would actually, where you think there's enough skier compaction to truly improve stability reliably?
Reliably, I think, is the key word here. I'm going to use an example. I'll just show. So Bow Summit, classic area you'd think is, you get skier compaction. But for example, every year, this area here on Bow Summit gets skied like to moguls, like crazy skier compaction. But every spring, someone goes and triggers a very large 2 or a small 3 that goes down into these trees. And that's I mean, that's something we see pretty typically, I think, in the Rockies with when we have a lot of on the ground depth horror surface or depth horror faceting, because you can never really penetrate. Skier compaction is not going to get down that far. I mean, even a place like Wawa Ridge at Sunshine, I remember maybe 15 years ago, I saw Avalanche with pretty much moguls in it, but this is very late spring. So it warmed up a lot and it penetrated deep, the warmth, and it got sliding on those really deep, persistent weak layers that a skier compaction is going to go and hit into. So really, when I'm thinking about backcountry travel and skier compaction, I'm thinking like, did those last layers get skied enough? I'm not really thinking long term, but those short term kind of, oh, did that surface horror, like you said, did that get skied out completely? Do I have to worry about that? When we're talking about persistent weak layers or very, very deep persistent slabs, that's not something that comes into my mind as far as skier compaction, keeping it safe.
Yeah, Zoe, I bet you have I mean, we don't have a ton of time, but I bet you have some stories from Sunshine. You know, skier compaction does get train open for you, but then you do have to monitor it, don't you?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely not something we take for granted, even within the ski hill. There's a lot of instances where things will still step down to the deeper layers, maybe even when you're not expecting it. But skier compaction certainly does help, and it's what allows us to open the terrain we do at the ski hill, really, the steep kind of complex terrain we have. So yeah, I think that's all I have to add there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess skier compaction, the reason it's such a debate, you know, some people be like, never trust skier compaction, and other people are like, well, it's obviously a thing. I think it just takes as much experience to evaluate the effect of skier compaction as it does to evaluate the snowpack. So unfortunately, there are no easy, you know, quick, hard and fast rules for that.
One good point for that. Sorry to interrupt. One good point for that would be something like surface horror will really be affected by skier compaction, but that like near surface faceting or those melt freeze crusts, really skier compaction isn't going to do much for that. You're going to still have those weak layers in the snowpack.
I have a question maybe for you guys while you were talking about that is, and I think we discussed that beforehand, like, you know, in the previous years, is how far down the snowpack does a skier like have an effect on the layers?
Depends on how skinny the skis are.
It's the width of the ski to the width of your belly ratio, I think, really. I don't know, Joel. It really does depend on there are studies, and you can actually, Scott Thumlard, I know, has written papers on it on what do they call it? The what bubble, Zoe? I forget anyhow.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank right now.
How far you affect it depends a lot on how stiff the snow is and how dense the snow is above the layer. So it constantly varies is the short answer. The stress bubble. Thank you, Marika. Yeah, thanks. Dave, there was another question you said from Brent, and then we just had to, I was going to roll through a couple of the access issues we're facing in the Rockies after that.
Yeah, you bet. Brent, are you out there? Do you want to share your question about glaciers?
Oh,
maybe he's chowing down on stir fry. Brent asked, any word on glacier coverage lately?
Marcus, you got anything to go on there?
Not really. No, I haven't really been on a glacier recently. I mean, I could see one from my house. Looks pretty all right. With that said, the sickle went 2.5 too, so I'm sure that filled in some holes. But
yeah, generally this winter there's been you know, some of the glaciers, say Wapta and stuff, got up near 2 meters pretty early on. Tough to know how much wind has stripped off there. I haven't seen a report lately.
I've seen some bare ice.
Have you?
Yeah, like I think Hector is still pretty bare or close to bare.
Well, with these winds, Zoe was talking, and Marcus too, about just the high variability in the alpine, and I think that would be true on glaciers as well. You know, depressions and sheltered areas are going to have a fairly deep snowpack, and and scoured areas are going to be really thin. And the reason, for everyone else wondering, the reason Brent would be asking that is your chances of falling in a crevasse are much higher if there's only 40 centimeters of snow covering them as opposed to 3 meters. So people often start referencing how deep the snow is on glaciers, especially looking ahead to spring when traffic on glaciers really increases. We will want to look ahead here on what's going up for the next say month, Zoe and Marcus. But before we do that, maybe I was just gonna brief everyone on sort of the 3 things that have been affecting access in the Rockies for the last little while. And if you've been following these updates, we've talked about them before, but there's also a new one. So the main one we've been talking about all year, there's that Baer closure right near Bow Summit. Sort of, if you're looking at Bow Summit, a little left. Last time we had it up on the map for you. Everyone should know this one by now. It's been there all winter. But it's like vital that we don't go in there. Hey, people are getting tickets. Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, people are getting tickets for being in there, and it's just irresponsible to be in there. It's pretty obvious. It's signed. We'll all stay out of there. There is some good skiing, but we're gonna give it a pass this year, team. The other access issue we've been talking about all year is the parking at Sherbrooke Lake. West Louise Lodge or Great Divide Lodge has closed their gate and isn't allowing us to park there this year, which is also your exit from the WAPTA. Hey, so if you're planning your spring trip, start planning for that. The parking lot that Parks has been generous enough to plow a parking lot there, the summer parking lot. It's a little tough to get into, not bad, but if you don't have good tires or have a low clearance vehicle or something, it could be tricky for you. And there's only, say 8, maybe 10 spots, not even 10. It's quite tight. So some days, if you're planning to go there, you might get there and the parking lot's full. And we kind of just have to eat that one this year. We don't want to park on the side of the Trans-Canada, and we don't want to park in the truckers chain up area. Those are things that will seriously come back to haunt the community if we piss off the wrong government agencies with those, okay? And that also leads us into Highway 93 North and South. It's been a busy season out in the mountains, and that's awesome. It's good to see everyone getting out. But we do have to start watching our parking along the side of the road. It's not technically allowed to just park on the side of the road up there on 93 North and 93 South. You want to look for the plowed turnouts and the spots where, where Parks has been able to clear room for us. If you do end up having to park on the side of the road, you got to make sure you dig out a spot if you need to, or you pull into a spot where you're highly visible right over off the road, and do so at your own risk, right? I mean, someone might smash into you there, a plow might come by and bury your car. So those are the risks. Joel, looked like you were going to add something.
Well, I've been going to the 93 South a little bit more like a lot of people, and there's definitely been a lot of roadside parking. Tumbling is an interesting place because you're like 1.5 kilometers away from either Numa, well, maybe 2K from Numa and like 1.5 km from Paint Pots, right? So people do park roadside there, which, I don't know, it's the first year I park roadside there sometimes, and I'm like, oh, I didn't know you could do that, but whatever. Yeah, there's been a lot of people parking on either side of the road, and like sometimes there's a group of cars like 100 meters away, and like to be closer, you park by yourself. Like, I think like that's definitely something that we can all make an effort on, is like, even if you're gonna walk for like a 30 second or a minute, maybe like, if there's other people parked there, like in a high visible space, like make sure maybe you go there instead of, well, my skiing's on the other side of the road. Like, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But yeah, we've been seeing that a lot. Like, and tumbling's been an area that, we've been seeing 20, 25 cars some days there on the weekends. So like roadside.
Yeah, and I love being the old grouchy guy, but this is something that will come back to bite us. There's definitely whispers of people in parks and stuff looking into it, and I sense we better get on it before someone makes rules for us on that one. I think that's it, unless anyone has else to add. Cool. Zoe, maybe we just talk like less than 2 minutes maybe about where we go from here, snowpack wise, guesses, that kind of thing. just so everyone has an idea of what we're looking at for the next few weeks.
Sure. So as everyone knows, we've got this Arctic ridge sitting over us, bringing these really cold temperatures. Good news is it does look like it will start to break down the next week or so. And following that, we'll hopefully have some more seasonable temperatures and more snowfall coming in. But really, this big thing with this cold temperatures is that it is going to be faceting and weakening our snowpack. And that's going to be something to look forward to with incoming snow following this. Yeah,
that makes sense for sure. And then seasonally, next time we meet, it's going to be early March. So still sort of midwinter. It'll be after that where most of us will start looking ahead to spring, which is a big deal in the Rockies and sort of a change in mindset. But for the next month, we're pretty much midwinter. Marcus, you get are people going to be changing what they ski or kind of just continue on looking for the deepest, best snow?
I mean, we'll probably see a pretty classic transfer to places like the Wapta going into March, depending on how much people want to camp, I guess, because I'm not really sure, it's not going to be the same with the ACC huts, obviously. If you are going to camp on the Wapta, you just get a bivvy permit to get from Lake Louise Info Center. It's super easy. And yeah, you're probably going to see a movement into those kind of things. I mean, it's going to be a different year because there's not going to be as many hut trips. So probably more camping, hopefully higher up. As the days get longer, it's a little easier to bear camping too. So I think that could be something that has a sort of spotlight this spring. And then getting into, late spring, obviously Columbia ice field, those bigger ice fields are something that gets on everyone's mind. Right now, as I just thought about that glacier question, and I was up at the Columbia ice field a few weeks ago and there was like 0 snow on the ice. It was like bare ice everywhere. Just little strips of snow, just nothing. I don't know about the ice field proper. I didn't get that high, but yeah, the lower stuff's pretty bare. But yeah, you'll see glacier travel definitely ramp up, and hopefully we get a huge dump and more POW.
That makes sense. Yeah, no, I feel like we got another month or so of powder skiing in us, guys. Joel, what's going on around the shop these days?
What's going on around the shop? We're renovating still. It's endless. We'll be done at some point. No, we're with every cold week come broken boots, broken skis, broken bindings, skins that won't stick, all that stuff, right? So it's always kind of funny that first cold spell, it's like you're like, oh yeah, today is gonna be like a day for whatever, like broken bindings, like broken brakes. So it's been a lot of fixing recently, and we definitely see a lot of very gritty people getting out at -35 and showing us their photos of like their beard sickles and everything. So yeah, it's been interesting. But yeah, we've been fixing a lot of skins. That's like one of the things that we're seeing right now a lot with the cold weathers. Lots of people not super used to the kind of like high maintenance kind of situations like that where it makes a difference. So yeah. Otherwise, not much skiing for the staff this week. I wish I could tell everybody where to go tomorrow. I'm probably going to go to Emerald, but yeah, there's a lot of good skiing, but not a lot of people getting out there. So yeah. No, and that sort of leads to maybe my last point before we wrap up and do the draw here. And that's just that we talk often. It's pretty easy to find online, actually on the Ski Uphill website, a list of things to carry in your first aid kit, at least the things to carry. Everyone knows what avalanche safety gear to carry. But really, I was talking to a few guides this week, and what's most important right now for safety equipment is your cold weather kit. If something goes wrong, someone just twists a knee and can't walk, they're going to get cold really quick. I don't know if you guys have tried having an outside coffee with a friend in the last little while, but you can't sit still for an hour. And if you're injured and waiting for a rescue and sitting still in -30 for an hour plus, hypothermia is super real. So more than even those other things, right now, everyone I know is carrying extra down layers, fire building material,
And actually some of the guides I've talked to have thrown stoves in now and little pots so you can make hot water, stove to keep things warm. Definitely tarps, tarps to wrap people up in, and an extra foam. Some people are even carrying a full thermarest with them for the next little while. And it makes sense. If you think of the amount of gear you carry for all the other rescue scenarios, the most likely problem you're going to have right now is cold. Someone breaks a binding and can't ski out and has to wait for you to come back with skis, anything like that. Cold's going to be real. So let's all plan for that for a while. Dave, anything else we need to, we've gone past our 1 hour, but not too bad. Anything else we need to get to or do before we?
Oh, I thought we did really well tonight. Covered a lot of material there, and in 70 minutes. I think the only thing that's outstanding is the draw for the season's uphill pass for Mount Norquay.
That's right. So for those of you that maybe didn't catch the whole spiel there, Mount Norquay has, I think mostly thanks to Ski Uphill setting it up with them, Mount Norquay has an uphill track that you can go practice ski turn on, get your fitness. And if you want to go up there for the day, it's $15 for the day. But they also sell season passes, and Ski Uphill is nice enough to be giving one away.
Yeah, they're $99 for those. Can you imagine paying somebody $99 to ski uphill for the entire season?
Well, I could see it because you're paying $99 to not deal with avalanche hazard, to have ski patrol rescue, to be able to go inside and get a hot chocolate after you're done. Yeah, I would do it.
Okay.
And, but someone's going to win it for free here. And just going through the questions, it was actually, I had trouble picking between everybody there, but I'm going to give it to Eric, who asked about compaction, because that was a fun discussion. And then Eric was also mentioned later that part of the parking issue this year is that everyone's driving their own vehicles because of COVID. And yeah, you're right. That is adding to the pressure, but it's just showing us the problem ahead of time anyhow.
Hey, thanks, guys.
No, thank you, Eric. We appreciate it.
So Eric,
figured out my mic problem.
Yeah, maybe just hang on with us afterwards and we'll just get you hooked up with the store. How does that sound?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Awesome. Joelle, I just see one more question there before we go, just about ski uphill guided days. Someone there that is saying they haven't skied much in the backcountry on their own. So we should set up another MTN Guiding ski uphill day. I don't think we have one on the calendar right now, but we'll get one for next month.
Was yesterday. And yes, they went out. And yes, they did not freeze to death. I saw them after. They went with, I think they went with Andrew. And they went to observation and they had great turns, but it wasn't very warm. They kept their puffies on, but in the sun, apparently, I think that's kind of like the theme of for those who are skiing the next 3 days, go somewhere where it's sunny. And it seems like that it's been skiing very good, right? Like low winds, high pressure, beautiful views, bring some little hot packs and boot gloves and warm tea and you're good to go. But yeah, we're gonna be scheduling one more in March. Those have been very popular this year, and I think like it's kind of cool to just see everybody, all the people who are not very used to it, just kind of get into it through that avenue. But there's a lot of ski guys in town who are working a lot with beginners this year. So like if you're a beginner and you feel like you don't quite know what you're doing, no one really knows perfectly what they're doing. So what like Kevin always says, a skin track is not a sign of intelligence. Like I remind you that like there's a lot of resources, both like professional and not necessarily like professional, for getting into it. So March 8th, I think, is going to be the next MTN one, from what Gavin just texted me. But yeah, all the guys in the valley are like more than happy to bring groups out. Everybody's stoked on the great conditions we're having right now.
And Joelle, where do you find out about the ski uphill days? Is it just a question of checking?
You find out. We do post them on Facebook and Eventbrite, so you can sign up on Eventbrite. Usually, we post the next one right after like the previous one happened. So look for our Facebook page in the next couple of days to see the next date. But yeah, it should be March 8th, unless something like special kind of like happens for conflict. For scheduling, but yeah.
John Hickey is asking, he's also asking what the coldest one is going to be, because apparently he's worked on Baffin Island. So
Oh, well, then you're good. Yeah. Yeah. It's, anyway, it's
yeah. So March 8th, that's going to be great.
March 8th, yeah, I think I might like, one of the things I was thinking about that we were gonna like remind people is like, look at your gear this week as well. Like it's the kind of week where plastic fails. So like, make sure you bring a repair kit. Make sure you bring like stuff to like tie, zip wraps, zip ties to lock your brakes down if something breaks. Or, for us, we've been doing a lot of skin maintenance. So, pass a clean iron on your skins, just to kind of refresh the glue, make sure your skis are waxed, at minus 35, like there's not a lot of glide already. So if you ski low angle, you won't go very far. So I think it's like a good week to, if you don't ski, well, spend a bit of time maintaining your gear maybe for like ahead of the spring before it all breaks.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I guess just to wrap it up, I want to give a big thank you, Zoe. You showed up with so much info for us and some great visuals, and thanks for all the research you did. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I think it was a little bit bumbly with those pictures there, but I hope they helped out.
No, it was awesome. We appreciate that. That's the knowledge we come for. And Marcus, thanks so much for sharing all your beta, and I really like those visuals with showing us on the mountains where some of those lines are and just kind of putting them in space for me. Thanks for that.
No problem.
Dave, as always, you run a tight ship, my friend. Thanks for putting this on.
Well, I try. So we'll be coming back again in March with another snowpack date. I've forgotten what day have we picked for that.
I don't know. Gavin's probably going to text us in a second to tell us. So
March 11th.
Actually, it looks like it's March 11th. So it's in fact the second Thursday of March. We'll be back ready to talk about snowpack again. And thank you, Kevin and Zoe and Marcus and Joelle for joining us tonight. And we look forward to hearing from everybody next time.
Yeah, and tune in March because it's all the beta for couloirs and glaciers usually.
Excellent. Thanks, Joelle. Okay. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks for coming.